Welcome back, everyone, to Dungeon Brew. Today, Diana and I are going to be talking about narrative design, specifically narrative system design. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Dungeon Brew.
Welcome back, everyone. Diana and I are going to be talking about narrative system design today. If you recall, TTRPGs are narrative in nature, and for that reason, it is super helpful for GMs to understand what narrative design is. And that way, they can really bring their game to life for characters. So today, Diana and I are continuing this series talking about narrative system design. Diana, why don't you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, sure. Narrative system design. Again, I'm going to first compare it to video gaming here, where we see it kind of applied to the most. Um, System design is where the best way to think about it is how the story's told through the reactions of the NPCs, the world around the actual character. So, um, I tend to think about it on with Fable, the game, because that's got a little more of, I think, the extreme approach or the extreme examples where on Fable you can make evil decisions or you can make good decisions, and based on what decisions you make, you get to make your character good or bad,
Mm-hmm.
and that's going to affect how the world around you reacts to you. In the typical way that it's represented, you'll see it in even in games like Skyrim, where when you're playing and you make a decision, like you go and you shoot a chicken, how is that town going to respond? How are the people going to respond?
Yeah, I like that. It's almost as though you're thinking about whatever sandbox you're playing in as a system, and you're like an agent or maybe a virus that's thrown into that sandbox that suddenly starts moving the sand and building sandcastles and doing all sorts of things. And it's how does the rest of the world around that respond to whatever you're doing in that environment?
Yeah, it comes with all the it's sort of like action and consequence based on the story of the world. What are the morals? What are the laws and what religions does the world like live by? And that narr or the system design aspect of it is really going to kind of put that together, but bring it to action through the decisions that you're making as the player.
Yeah, absolutely. I know in our next video we're going to be talking about narrative content design, and in this one we're talking about system design, but both of these have an element of world building in them. I know in our first video we talked about how, as a GM specifically in your TTRPG game, you've already done a lot of world building, but you're not really done with the process when you're coming into narrative design. It's still part of your ongoing process of deciding how things are all going to interact or work with the characters or the players that are moving throughout that world. I'm kind of envisioning this idea of how you just conceptualize an environment that exists. You have a town, you have a city. There's already these governing laws from maybe your religious cults or your government that are all in place. Everybody already has their own stories. They're moving about their day-to-day business. They all have their own problems, their own motives, their own goals, ambitions in life that are there, and then you're throwing in your players in the midst of that. And how does everyone suddenly respond to this person that is now there disrupting the natural flow of their life?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm curious how, I guess, you as a GM, like how would you take these system pieces and how do you put them into the game? How do you measure these things in D&D?
Yeah, so measuring them and I think putting them into the system has both qualitative and quantitative purpose behind it in the way that you have to handle it as a GM. So the systemic pieces, to answer that part of the question first, I think there's things that we do, and we actually see these in video games too, but there's things that we do to help measure the impact of players with the world around them. And this comes primarily, the way that I've seen it, in the assignment of like reputation rules. So we've seen this in like World of Warcraft, where you have like reputations with different factions depending on how many quests you complete for them, or you even see it in Baldur's Gate, like Shadows of Om. When you're engaging with the world, it increases or decreases your popularity and your acceptance by the NPCs or the governments or the cities in the realm that you're traveling through. And in D&D or another TTRPG, you do the same thing. How you engage with the NPCs, the quests that you complete for them, how you act when you're around them, whether you're rude or you're what's the word I'm looking for? Altruistic in nature, is going to affect how they see you. And so I love to incorporate reputation charts where you see that kind of move up and down the scale as players engage with the world around them. Another
Hmm.
way of doing it, and I'll keep rambling, but feel free to interrupt me, is alignment changes. That's probably one of my biggest pet peeves is when you don't incorporate alignment changes into the game. When you start seeing your players have their characters behave in a way that's incongruent with how they've developed their character, there should be an alignment shift. If you start doing good things when you were a chaotic evil character, you should be bumping up closer to that neutral level a little bit and showing that there's a change in the character. And along with that, we oftentimes do personality generators. If your character is supposed to be greedy, but now they're now giving their money away to the church or to the poor to increase their reputation points, maybe you see a personality shift and they're not scoring so high on that greedy level. So if you're doing personality generators too, you might have your character adjust their personality based on the actions they're taking in the world.
Yeah, it's nice that GMs get to do that. I think in video games it's a little different. They have to, I mean, the system design has to go into what happens when your character is just kind of clicking through the dialogue and
Mm-hmm.
just, going through the steps to get through the game without actually reading the story or without really thinking about what they're doing. They just want to get from point A to
Mm-hmm.
point B. And that system design has to kind of keep them still on the quest. And I think it's different with being with D&D and being a GM.
Yeah, I think there is some complexity to video games and how they create the plot arcs, which we'll talk about more, I think, in the content design. But you're right. In a TTRPG, if you're sitting around the table and my players are having their characters just rush through the dialogue, I can have the king get kind of off put by that and frustrated with them and, start treating them in a different way because I can be innovative in that moment and be like, seems like you guys don't really want to talk to me very much. So there's the door to let it hit you on the way out. Like they can immediately have a response to the characters just trying to rush through the conversation to get to that next dungeon or get to that next quest or get that next reward. And that's part of the fun, which is the qualitative piece of system design, or yeah, system design within TTRPGs, is that you get to decide how your NPCs respond in dialogue, how their behaviors are responsive, all those different things based on what your players are doing in that moment. And that's part of what goes into this too.
Hmm.
So I know we're going to be talking about this more in detail. You and I are going to have a series of videos that kind of talk about how to create system design around your dialogue, around behavior, around morality, crime, all those things that go into the game. But we just wanted to give an introduction here of what narrative system design was so you can see how that's going to differ from narrative content design.
Oh yeah, this is gonna get fun.
All right, you guys stay tuned. We'll see you next time.
Welcome to Dungeon